a preliminary report into Australia's strategic defence capability due to be handed to the federal government tomorrow. To discuss this, I'm joined by our Darwin Bureau Chief, Matt Cunningham. Matt, there are calls for more defence assets to be based in Australia's north. What's the likelihood of this happening as part of the review?
Well, you'd have to say it's pretty strong, Kieran, because it appears to have bipartisan support. I've been speaking to people from both sides of politics over the past week or so about this review and what they expect to come from it. Now, both politicians and defence experts are saying that there needs to be a restructuring of defence in this country so that more of those assets are based in Northern Australia, particularly given we're seeing China flexing its muscles in the Indo-Pacific region. I asked Madeleine King, the Minister for Northern Australia, today whether we needed to be placing those defence assets in a place where the action is more likely to happen.
Certainly is where the action is, and I've no doubt that report will be looking into the role of Northern Australia in our defence, as successive governments have been very aware of the vulnerabilities in the north, and I've no doubt that report will look into that, but I wouldn't want to preempt the outcomes of that review.
Now, Kieran, in the past decade or more, there's actually been a significant reduction in the number of troop numbers based here in the Northern Territory. If we have a look at this graph from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, you'll see those numbers have declined, particularly between about 2010 and 2018. There were more than 7,000 troops based in the top end in 2010. By 2018, that number had dropped to a little over 5,000. That was in large part due to the decision to take the 7 RAR, a regiment of the Australian Army, and move it from Darwin in the Northern Territory to Adelaide. That's a decision that's been heavily criticised in recent times, including by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. I asked Peter Dutton when he was here in the Northern Territory last week what he thinks about this strategic defence review and about the idea of having more troops and more assets based here in the top end. Here's how he responded.
There should be a greater concentration of assets and investment in the north. When we were in government, it was one of our key priorities to strengthen our responses in the north. More Australians should learn about the bombings of Darwin and understand the proximity to geography and the reality of what it means to defend a vast coastline and waterways to our north and to the northeast.
There are reports today as well about nuclear-capable B-52 bombers being rotated through the Tyndall Air Base, that's near Katherine. Have you got any more info on that?
Well, this was actually announced in February 2020, KG. I was at the Tyndall Air Base with the former Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, at the time when he actually announced the lengthening of the runway there at the Tyndall Air Base and extra fuel storage to allow that air base to have a rotation of these B-52 bombers through the top end. We're expecting 6 of them to be based here at any given time. Now, there has been a bit of reaction because there have been further reports today about these bombers being based in the top end and questions asked of the government about whether people in the Northern Territory should be worried that we're potentially becoming a target because aircraft like this are being rotated through the top end. Here's how the Minister, Madeleine King, responded to those questions.
There's been a lot of investment in Darwin and towns that host aircraft right across this country, but particularly in the Northern Territory, and that's welcome investment. It's good for the communities, it's good for jobs in those areas, the indirect jobs that come with having Defence Force people there. I do not think it increases the risk to those communities.
Now, KG, this strategic defence review is being conducted by Stephen Smith, the former Defence Minister, and others. That preliminary report is due to be handed to the government this week. We won't get the details straight away, though. It won't be until March next year that the government receives both the final report and makes the findings of that report public.